But before he got hurt, before he had the knee injury, you talk about a high flyer. The three flyers in the game at that time was Harper, Clyde Drexler, and Michael Jordan.
It doesn't make a lot of sense considering when each of them entered the league, but Dennis Rodman once referred to him as Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan. And when you think about all the MJ comparisons that have been made over the years, a pre-injury Ron Harper was one of the closest. A pure athlete who could slash and score while playing above the rim, yet could also lock you up on defense. He entered the league shortly after Jordan, so it wasn't much of a next Jordan billing as much as it was a player with a very similar skill set and high potential. And on top of his two-way ability, he also showed exceptional court vision and was an above-average rebounder for a two-guard. He was the local kid starring for his hometown team until he was punished for perceived bad choices. He was sent to the Clippers and looked the same until an ACL tear altered his career. After a few good individual years in LA, he would sign with the Bulls as Jordan's replacement. But after Jordan returned, he would reinvent himself as part of one of the greatest defenses the league has ever seen. And he would win 5 rings in 6 years with the Bulls and Lakers. And aside from lacking a reliable shot, Ron Harper was the definition of an all-around player. And if you got Big L name-dropping you in a verse, then you gotta have game. Let's jog your memory. An Ohio native, Ron Harper initially attended Belmont High School in Dayton, Ohio, but he would get a late start on his basketball career, as he was cut from the freshman team and then didn't play as a sophomore. He would eventually transfer to Kaiser High School, which is also in Dayton, where he would finally get a spot on the basketball team, as he would be first-team All-State as a junior in '81. Then as a senior, he would again be named first-team All-State, as he would average 20.5 points, 13.4 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 steals, and 6 blocks per game. So Harper had really proved himself over the last couple years, but he wouldn't be at a big-name program entering his '83 freshman season. Harper's talent was recognized, but he had a less-than-stellar academic record, as well as a speech impediment, which reportedly deterred a lot of programs from seriously pursuing him, as he would go to a school that wanted him, in Miami of Ohio, as they would also enroll him in speech therapy. This time, a freshman Harper would be a day-one starter and one of the best players on the team, as he would finish as the Redskins' second leading scorer, as well as their leading rebounder. And his 2.2 steals per game would be the second highest mark in the conference. Yet although Miami of Ohio possessed a great defense, they had a poor offense, and would finish the regular season at 13-14, and then lose to Ball State in the first round of the MAC tournament. 1984 was much better, as the Redskins were one of the nation's best defensive teams. Harper would lead the team in scoring and rebounding, while shooting nearly 54% from the field, as he was named first team all-conference, and the Redskins would win the MAC with a 21-5 record. Then would win the conference tournament, as they got an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament, but it would be over quickly, as they would lose to SMU in round 1, with Harper putting up 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists. Going into the '85 season, the Redskins had a new coach in Jerry Pearson, and became a more offensive team, and this led to Harper leading the team and finishing second in the conference in scoring, as well as rebounding and blocks, as he would average a double-double this season and shoot over 54% from the field, and his 2.6 steals per game would lead the conference, as he would be named first team all-conference as well as MAC Player of the Year. The Redskins wouldn't have a great year, finishing at 16-9, but then Harper would set a MAC tournament record with 45 points in a semifinal win over Ball State, but they would eventually lose to Ohio in the title game. However, they would get an at-large bid to play Len Bias and Maryland in the first round of the NCAA tournament, yet they would lose by a single point in overtime, as Harper finished with 26 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 steals on over 64% shooting. Harper had an incredible senior season, as he would again lead the team and conference in scoring, rebounding, steals, and blocks, while shooting over 54%, as he would even record the first triple-double in conference history versus Ball State. He would again be named first team all-conference and the MAC Player of the Year, and would be recognized as a consensus second team All-American. He would do it all for a Redskins team who finished the regular season at 21-5, but would eventually lose to Ball State in the MAC tournament semifinals. Harper would get one more shot at the NCAA tournament, as Miami of Ohio received an at-large bid to play Iowa State. Yet although Harper finished with 17 points and 13 rebounds, he would only shoot 7 of 22 from the field, and Harper making it out of the first round just wasn't meant to be, as the Cyclones' Jeff Hornacek would hit a game-winning buzzer beater to knock off the Redskins, ending Harper's incredible college career, as he left Miami of Ohio as the all-time scoring leader in the Mid-American Conference, while also becoming the first male player in conference history to record at least 2,000 points and 1,000 rebounds. So going into the '86 NBA draft, Harper looked like a bona fide two-way star with endless potential, and very much in the same mold as a soon-to-be third-year guard in Chicago.
The Cleveland Cavaliers select Ron Harper of Miami of Ohio.
Harper was taken 8th overall, which may seem a little late, but this was still an era defined by great big men, so it was quite impressive that Harper was taken within the top 10, as he would be the first guard off the board. And just getting Harper would have been a successful draft for the Cavs, but they also possessed the first overall pick and had selected North Carolina big man Brad Daugherty. And then they would make a trade with Dallas for their second round pick in Georgia Tech point guard Mark Price, as Cleveland's 1986 draft haul still stands as one of the best in NBA history. The 87 Cavs looked like a team destined to make some noise, just not this year, as they were very young, featuring just 2 players who were older than 26. Their 3 best players this season were essentially first-year guys, as on top of Daugherty and Harper, they featured John Hot Rod Williams, who was drafted the year prior but wasn't able to play for the team due to being charged in a point-shaving scandal, which he would eventually be found not guilty of. So these 3 would be the team's top scorers, as Harper had an incredible rookie season, leading the team in scoring and steals on career highs in both categories, while finishing second in assists. His 2.5 steals per game would be top 5 in the NBA, while his nearly 23 points per game would be top 20 in the league and first among rookies. Yet he would finish second to Chuck Person in Rookie of the Year voting, but would still be named first team All-Rookie. Harper would play and start in all 82 games and hit double figures in 80 of them, while recording 5 double-doubles. His rookie year would be full of career highs, as he would drop a career-high 40 points in a February 4th loss to Boston. Then 6 days later, he would pull down a career-high 16 boards to go along with 25 points in a defeat of New York. And finally, on March 10th, he would have 28 points and a career-high 10 steals in a loss to Philly. And his athleticism and great finishes throughout the year would get him a spot in the dunk contest. Most of Cleveland's scoring would come from their starting lineup, as overall they had the second worst scoring offense in the league, and would only manage a 31-51 record. As Harper's great rookie year would see him average about 23 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. John Bagley had been the Cavs' starting point guard in '87, but they would trade him to New Jersey in the offseason, meaning the second year Mark Price was getting the reins to the offense. Harper looked to be picking up where he left off, as he was averaging 23 points, 2.5 steals, and 2 blocks after the first 2 games. But he would badly sprain his ankle in the second game and wouldn't return until December 30th, as he would only appear in 57 games this year. And when he returned, it would take some time to get back in his groove. But overall, he would hit double figures in 46 games, including 16 games with at least 20, and 3 double-doubles. The Cavs were 12-14 when Harper returned, and were at a respectable 28-27 in late February. But they knew they needed something more in their attempt to turn in their first winning season in over a decade. So on February 25th, they sent rookie point guard Kevin Johnson, along with Mark West and Tyrone Corbin, to the Suns for a package headlined by all-star forward Larry Nance, who on top of giving them good offensive production, was a great defensive player. The Cavs wouldn't see huge improvement after the trade, but they were still able to go 14-13 the rest of the way, as their 42-40 record got them into the playoffs to take on Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Harper sat out Game 1 due to his ankle, and Chicago would win. And with Craig Elo primarily guarding him, Jordan would go off for 50 points in Game 1. This would prompt Harper to say that if he were playing, Jordan would not have had 50 points. And Harper was back for Game 2 to back up his talk. And he was right, as Jordan wouldn't drop 50. He would drop 55, and Harper would have just 10 points as the Cavs fell behind 0-2. Jordan would dominate the rest of the series, averaging over 45 points per game as the Bulls won in 5. Harper improved the rest of the way, averaging over 20 points and nearly 3.5 steals on over 54% shooting. And he would memorably block Jordan late in Game 4, and then draw 2 fouls on him, as Jordan would foul out and the Cavs would even the series, only to come up short in Game 5. But Harper's season ended with him averaging about 15.5 points, 5 assists, and 2 steals per game. But a full season of Nance and a healthy Harper would lead to a historic Cavs year in 1989. Harper would again play and start in all 82 games and finish third on the team in scoring, as 4 of the 5 starters put up over 17 points per game, while all shooting at least 51%. Harper would also finish second on the team in assists and first in steals, as his 2.3 steals per game would be a top 10 mark in the league. And he was a great defender overall, as his 101.6 defensive rating would also be top 10. Harper would hit double figures in 77 games, including 40 games with at least 20, while also recording 6 double-doubles, as well as his first career triple-double in a January 31st defeat of Philly, when he had 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists. And he would make a return to the dunk contest after sitting out last year due to his ankle. Cleveland was arguably the league's hottest team in the first half of the season. They would string together an 11-game win streak from mid-December to early January, and were atop the East at 41-12 on their way to their 42nd win in a February 28th game versus Detroit. But the Pistons' Rick Mahorn would give Price an elbow to the head, forcing him to miss 2 games, and even when he returned, he just looked off, as the Cavs went just 15-13 the rest of the way to finish at 57-25. And even though this was a then franchise record for wins, their late season slide had resulted in them finishing as the 3rd seed in the East and getting a rematch with the Bulls. This would be another very close 5-game series, with Jordan and Harper each leading their team in scoring. Harper played well, putting up over 19 points and 2 steals on over 56% shooting, but Jordan just played better, averaging nearly 40 points and 3 steals on about 52% shooting. Game 1 would be bad, as Harper had just 14 points in 25 minutes of play before fouling out in a loss. Game 2 was his best, as he finished with 31 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 steals on over 63% shooting in a win, before another 14-point performance in a Game 3 loss. He would have 17 in a Game 4 win, setting up a series-deciding Game 5. Yet after a 22-point, 6-assist performance and the Cavs leading by 1 in the final seconds, the Bulls were about to inbound the ball, and for some reason Harper wasn't on Jordan.
He gives to Jordan. Jordan to the circle, puts the shot in the air. Good! The game's over, and the Bulls.
So Jordan hit the shot to win the series, as Harper's season would end with him averaging about 18.5 points, 5.5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. The 1990 season began with Harper playing great. After the first 7 games, he was putting up incredible numbers of 22 points along with about 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals, and over a block per game. But then on November 15th, a headline came out which blindsided everybody. The Cavs had traded their 25-year-old star swingman to the Clippers, and it didn't make a lot of sense, as the reported consensus was that no one on the team was expecting Harper to be traded or wanted him to be traded. But it turned out he was traded because of who he was associating with and what he was allegedly doing. Cavs GM Wayne Embry would explain that he started receiving calls from the NBA's head of security, informing him that Harper had been socializing with suspected drug dealers, with some of them even under surveillance, and that law enforcement may want to interview Harper to get information. Embry would go on to suggest to Harper that he distances himself from those friends. Yet Harper would not take the suggestion, as he felt that it was his business and that he was old enough to decide who he did and didn't hang out with. As head coach Lenny Wilkens would say, that it was essentially a guilty by association type of situation. And once one of Harper's friends was set to be arrested, Embry and Wilkens felt that a future trade was inevitable, even though according to each of them, they didn't want to trade Harper. But later Embry received another heads up that Harper was going to be subpoenaed, yet Harper maintained his innocence, even offering to take a drug test and referring to his still high level of play as proof that he wasn't involved with anything bad. But then more rumors came out that Harper's car had allegedly been used in at least one drug deal, among other things, and now Embry would recommend a trade of Harper, as he would explain that even though there was no evidence, he was tired of the distractions and didn't want any of the young players who looked up to Harper to follow in his footsteps or get involved with any of his friends, as at least one of Harper's friends who was being investigated would frequent their games. And once Cavs owner Gordon Gunn found out, according to Wilkens, he didn't sugarcoat that he wanted Harper off the team immediately. But Embry would have a different account, saying that Wilkens told Gunn in a conversation that they needed to move Harper. And a lot of these rumors had been happening as Harper was still on the Cavs, as he played his last 2 games in Cleveland knowing he was going to get traded, just not knowing when. But the hometown kid was eventually shipped to LA. And even worse was that the Cavs sent a couple first-round picks to the Clippers as well, while only receiving Danny Ferry and Reggie Williams in return. And Harper would never end up having any charges filed against him. But what's done is done, and it was a new beginning for Ron Harper. The Clippers weren't as established as the Cavs, but they featured guys like Charles Smith and Ken Norman, as well as their first overall pick in the '88 draft in Danny Manning, who had returned from an ACL tear that limited him to just 26 games as a rookie last year. Harper would immediately join the starting lineup and recorded a 21-point, 15-rebound double-double in his Clippers debut, and over the next 27 games, he would lead the Clippers in scoring and hit double figures in all but one game. He was having another great performance in a January 16th game versus Charlotte, as he was up to 33 points with about 7 minutes left in the game. But after catching a pass under the basket, his knee buckled. Harper was able to walk off under his own power, but it was announced the following day that he had torn his ACL as well as cartilage, ending his season and putting his career in jeopardy, as the Clippers were 16-9 when Harper went down, but would eventually finish the year at 30-52, with Harper's overall season seeing him average about 23 points, 5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. So it would be an offseason full of rehab for Harper. But since the injury had occurred about halfway through the 1990 season, there was some optimism that he could return at some point in the 91 season. The Clippers weren't having a great year, as they were 14-27 when it was announced that Harper would be returning. He would start on a minutes restriction in a bench role, but in just his second game back, he had 23 points in 25 minutes off the bench. He would return to the starting lineup after 5 games, and by his 9th game, he was back to playing over 35 minutes a night. And although he wasn't quite playing at the level he was before the injury, he wasn't far off, as he would finish second on the team in scoring and assists, as well as first in steals, with his biggest decline coming in his efficiency, as he only shot about 39% from the field. But this was largely because he was relying more on his mid-range shot, and perhaps this was due to not having confidence to explode off his repaired knee just yet. But the scoring was there, as in the 39 games he appeared in this year, he would hit double figures in 37 of them. Harper's return wouldn't save the team, as they would go just 17-24 the rest of the way, to finish the year at 31-51 and miss the playoffs, with his comeback season seeing him average about 19.5 points, 5.5 assists, and a steal and a half per game. The Clippers had new life in 92. Manning had been splitting time between the starting lineup and a bench role for the past 2 years, but would be a full-time starter this season. Additionally, a draft day trade with Atlanta would net the Clippers a veteran point guard in Doc Rivers, yet he would only manage 59 games this year. And on top of that, Charles Smith was limited to 49 games due to a knee injury. But Harper and Manning would both play and start in all 82 games, as they would combine for over 37 points, with Harper also finishing second on the team in assists and tying for first in steals. His healthy season would see him hit double figures in 75 games, including one 30-point game in an April 3rd loss to Chicago, as he would also record 9 double-doubles and 1 triple-double. The Clippers would go through 3 coaches this year, ultimately landing on Larry Brown a little over halfway through the season, with the team sitting at 22-25. And under Brown, they would go 23-12, as they featured a top 5 defensive rating for the season, and a 45-37 record would be enough to get them a first-round matchup with Utah. The series would go the distance, and Harper would play well. He would put up 12 points and 4 assists in a Game 1 loss, and then would record a 20-point, 10-rebound double-double in Game 2. Yet LA would lose this one as well. So with their season on the line, Harper would have 16 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists in a win, then would follow that up with 26, 6, and 4, as the Clippers forced the Game 5, but they would come up short, with Harper recording 16 points and 7 assists in a 9-point defeat. But his healthy regular season would see him average about 18 points, 5 assists, and 2 steals per game. LA would be involved in a 3-team deal over the offseason, which saw them ship away Rivers and Smith, yet receive big man Stanley Roberts, as well as floor general Mark Jackson. So on paper, they'd look to have an improved team going into 93, but it wouldn't quite be the case, as although they saw their offense improve, their defense took a big hit. Harper would again finish second on the team in scoring, while shooting over 45% from the field, and averaging at least 2 steals for the final time of his career. He would have a mostly healthy season, appearing in 80 games, and hitting double figures in 76 of them, as he would have 32 games with at least 20, and 3 games with at least 30, while recording 7 double-doubles. The Clippers would hover around 500 all year, and look to be just an average team, and would in turn finish with an average record at 41-41, but it was enough for a first-round matchup versus the 2-seeded Houston Rockets, and they would once again take a better team the distance. Harper would again put together a solid series, as he finished second on the team in scoring. He would have just 2 points on 1 of 8 shooting, along with 3 blocks in Game 1, before leaving with a knee injury. But over the next 4 games, he would average 22 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists on over 51% shooting, while also averaging nearly 4 steals and 2 blocks per game. But after the team split the first 4 games, Houston would outlast LA in Game 5 to win by 4 and advance, as Harper's regular season would see him average about 18 points, 4.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. 1994 would be a big step back for the Clippers. They had a new coach in Bob Weiss and an unhappy star in Danny Manning, who was in a contract year and had no plans on re-signing with LA. Harper would have his first season post-injury averaging at least 20 points, while also averaging a career-high 6.1 rebounds, and his 1.9 steals per game would lead the team. He would hit double figures in 64 games and would have 11 games with at least 30, including an incredible performance on March 13th, when he had 39 points, 11 rebounds, 9 assists, and 6 steals in a March 13th defeat of Golden State, as he would also record 9 double-doubles and 2 triple-doubles. But the Clippers were struggling, as on February 24th, they had a 17-34 record. But then LA would agree to a trade with Atlanta, as Manning went to the Hawks, with their franchise legend Dominique Wilkins coming to the Clippers. Individually, Wilkins would play well for the team, but they wouldn't show any improvement as a whole. winning just 10 more games post-trade to finish at 27-55 and missing the playoffs, as Harper's season saw him average about 20 points, 6 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. But Harper was also unhappy and had been feuding with the Clippers all year, as he would reportedly say that being with the organization felt like being in jail. Luckily, he was now a free agent and would have a fresh start going into the 95 season. The Chicago Bulls would sign Ron Harper during the offseason, and it was pretty obvious why they had pursued him, as they had just finished their first full season without Michael Jordan, and Harper seemed like an ideal replacement. But even if he looked the part, his game didn't exactly translate well in Phil Jackson's triangle offense, as Harper was mainly a slasher who didn't possess a great shooting touch. And additionally, he had been more of a transition player throughout his career, and had shown to be more turnover prone in half-court sets due to making ill-advised drives to the cup. But Harper did have defensive ability due to his size, long arms, and anticipation. Yet there were concerns around his defensive consistency, as he seemed to pick and choose when he wanted to give full effort. Additionally, according to an excerpt from Sam Smith's book Second Coming, Harper's lateral movement looked terrible just a couple weeks into camp, to the point that he looked to be such a defensive liability that Jackson was skeptical on playing him. But the season began with Harper as a starter, yet his weaknesses and the new offensive system would see his numbers take a significant hit. The Bulls were still led by star forward Scottie Pippen, while also featuring point guard BJ Armstrong, as well as forward Tony Kukoc. Harper would be a starter for his first 52 games, yet in that time he would only hit double-figure scoring 14 times, while seeing big drops in his rebounds and assists, as he was only averaging about 8 points, 3 rebounds, and 2.5 assists, while shooting less than 41%. So he was kind of looking like a bad signing, which was likely why he was getting less than 24 minutes per game as a starter. But then on March 18th, with the Bulls holding a 34-31 record, a fax came through from Michael Jordan, with just 2 simple words. Harper had already been relegated to the bench for the past month, but now any chance of him returning to the starting lineup was gone, as he barely saw the court after Jordan's return, playing in 12 more games and only getting about 8.5 minutes per game. But the Bulls had gone 11-6 to close out the year, and their 47-35 record was enough for a playoff berth and a matchup with Charlotte. Harper would play just 1 minute of Game 1 before missing the remainder of the series, yet the Bulls didn't need him, as they would beat Charlotte in 4 games, setting up a second-round matchup with Orlando. Harper would be back for this series. He would get just 4 total minutes across games 1 and 2, as the teams were split. Harper would miss Game 3, and Chicago would fall behind 2-1, but he would return for the remainder of the series, as the Bulls unfortunately lost in 6, with Harper's best performance coming in the Game 6 loss, when he had 8 points. But his first season in Chicago would see him average about 7 points, 2 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. But after such a down year, Harper would take this offseason much more serious. So with Jordan back, the wing positions were obviously filled, and now they had a new power forward in defensive star Dennis Rodman. So how was Harper going to fit in? One thing he had done exceptionally well for his career was pass the ball, as at this point he had a career average of nearly 5 assists per game. So knowing he possessed the court vision, he would be moved to point guard, but he had also prepared himself much better, as he spent this offseason working to strengthen his legs, after spending the previous offseason playing golf, and it would pay off. Harper's overall numbers didn't change much from the year before, but he would have his most efficient shooting season since before his knee injury, while also averaging less than 1 turnover in close to 24 minutes per game. But his move to point guard would more so be for defensive purposes, and he would rank 16th in the NBA in defensive rating, as the entire Bulls starting 5 would rank in the top 20. And Harper would be able to play to his strengths. His size allowed him to often guard the other team's shooting guard, while Jordan took their point guard, giving Harper more opportunities to do what he was best at in jumping passing lanes. And it didn't hurt that they had so much perimeter defensive versatility that they could basically switch everything. And Harper would acknowledge that he could gamble even more, knowing that his teammates would bail him out if he missed. And as most know, there wasn't much the Bulls could do wrong this year, as they featured the league's best scoring offense and 3rd best scoring defense. And by season's end, they had put up a then NBA record 72 wins, as they were title favorites going into a first-round matchup with Miami. Harper would see an increased role, receiving nearly 30 minutes per game and responding by averaging 10 points and nearly 4 assists, as well as over 2 steals per game, while shooting over 68% from the field. He would record double-digit scoring in games 1 and 3, and the Bulls would make quick work of the Heat in an easy 3-game sweep. Round 2 brought New York, and although the Knicks would hand Chicago a Game 3 loss, the Bulls would still advance with a gentleman's sweep. Offensively, Harper put up similar numbers on much lower efficiency, shooting just 36% from the field, but he would still put together his highest scoring output of the postseason, with 18 points in a Game 4 win. so the Bulls were rolling, and the conference finals would bring a rematch with the Magic. But Jordan wasn't going to lose to them again. Offensively, Harper would put up modest stats, but his defense would be his high point, as he would tie for the team lead with 2.3 steals per game and would have the lowest defensive rating out of all 5 starters, as he helped hold Nick Anderson to 31% shooting and Dennis Scott to 26.5%. And Harper's only game with double-figure scoring would come in Game 4, when he had 12 points, as the Bulls won to complete the sweep and make their first finals appearance since '93. Waiting for them were the Seattle Supersonics, and Harper got off to a great start, as over the first 2 games he was averaging 13.5 points, 2.5 steals, and a block, while shooting over 55%, as the Bulls went up 2-0. But then Harper's knee started to bother him, as he would manage just 1 minute in Game 3, 13 minutes in Game 4, and 1 minute in Game 5. But the Bulls were up 3-2. Harper would play through the pain in Game 6, logging 38 minutes and scoring 10 points. But just having him back out there helped the Bulls hold Seattle to 75 points, as they won the game, and a 32-year-old Harper had won his first NBA title, as his regular season saw him average about 7.5 points, 2.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, as the Bulls brought back virtually the same team in '97. Harper remained the starting point guard, yet would play similar minutes to back up Steve Kerr to help take some of the strain off his knees, as he had undergone another reconstructive surgery during the offseason. His numbers again were quite modest, yet he would also commit a career-low 0.7 turnovers per game. But again, it was his impact that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, and his availability that was most valuable, as he would appear in 76 games this season, which the Bulls needed, as Rodman, Kukoc, and Longley each missed at least 23 games this year. Yet the Bulls finished with a league-best 69-13 record, which makes you wonder if they could have broken last season's record had they had a healthy team all year. But they weren't complaining, as they again entered the playoffs as the top seed in the East and would take on Washington in round 1. Harper underwhelmed versus the Bullets, only shooting about 38%, yet still tying for the team lead with 1.3 steals per game. He would do a good job guarding Rod Strickland, as the Bullets guard only shot about 42% from the field and would average nearly 4 turnovers per game, as Chicago swept Washington to set up a second-round series versus Atlanta. Harper would up his offensive production, averaging nearly 10 points on about 47% shooting, and he would have the second lowest defensive rating among starters behind Jordan. He would have his hands full with Mookie Blaylock, but was still able to hound him into committing 4 turnovers per game, as the Bulls were able to take the series in 5, setting up a conference finals with the Miami Heat and another small, quick guard in Tim Hardaway. Once again, Harper's offensive contributions weren't anything special, at about 8 points and 4 assists on 39% shooting, but he would average nearly 2 steals per game and had his best defensive series up to this point, as Chicago as a whole was locked in. And although Hardaway would lead the Heat in scoring, he struggled against Harper, only shooting about 35% from the field, and the Heat would only crack 90 points once in the series, as Chicago jumped out to an easy 3-0 lead before Miami stole Game 4. But the Bulls would take Game 5, with Harper turning in his best game of the postseason, as he finished with 14 points on over 66% shooting, along with 8 rebounds and 6 assists, as the Bulls were back in the finals. This time they got the Utah Jazz, and for as surprising as Harper's defense had been against smaller, quicker guards throughout the postseason, many believed that Utah's John Stockton would be the one to expose him. Yet it was quite the opposite to begin the series. Harper wouldn't play well offensively in Game 1, but his size advantage allowed him to cut off Stockton's angles, and led to him committing 7 turnovers, as the Bulls took Game 1. And then Game 2 would see Harper drop 13 points, while holding Stockton to 4 of 12 shooting, and helping force 4 turnovers, as the Bulls went up 2-0. Stockton would play much better in Utah, averaging 17 points and 12 assists on over 50% shooting, as the Jazz would even the series. But after this, Harper would help hold him to just 10 total assists over the next 2 games, with the Bulls winning both, to repeat as NBA champions, with Harper's season seeing him average about 6.5 points, 2.5 assists, and a steal per game. It was the last dance in '98, as everyone knew that regardless of what happened with the Bulls this year, this would be the last season of this team. So naturally, anything less than a three-peat would be a failure. Harper would play and start in all 82 games, while also playing nearly 28 minutes per game, as he would see his numbers go up across the board, yet still would only average about a turnover per game, and would shoot a respectable 44.1%. Pippen had opted for ankle surgery to repair a ruptured tendon he had suffered during last year's conference finals shortly before the season began, as he would delay surgery so he could enjoy his summer. But he was also understandably upset that he was entering the final year of a criminally low 7-year, $18 million deal. So Pippen would miss nearly the entire first half of the season, which was a large reason for Harper's increased role, The Bulls were able to manage without him as they went 24-11 before Pippen returned on January 10th, and they would go 38-9 the rest of the way, which included a 13-game winning streak as they would again be the East top team with a 62-20 record. It was another first-round sweep for Chicago, this time versus New Jersey, as Harper would average about 9 points on an efficient 60% shooting. Harper would have a down series in the second round versus Charlotte, as he was a non-factor offensively, scoring a total of 20 points and dishing 10 assists across the 5-game series. But again, for the most part, it would be an easy gentleman's sweep for Chicago. The conference finals brought Reggie Miller and the Indiana Pacers, and this time the Bulls would get a real challenge. Harper would play well for the series, giving the team about 9 points on 50% shooting, along with nearly a block and a steal, and Harper would play a big part in holding Reggie Miller to below 42% shooting for the series. And then in Game 4, he and Miller would get chippy, as with less than 5 seconds left, and the Bulls up by 1, Harper and Miller got into a bit of a dust-up after Harper looked to pull Miller into the Bulls bench, leading to Miller retaliating, and according to Phil Jackson, throwing a punch, which if true, would have led to a Game 5 suspension. But during this sequence, Pippen had been fouled, and would have a chance to put the Bulls up by 3, yet he would miss both free throws, and then on the other end of the court, Miller would give the Pacers the win, and would even the series. It was eventually determined that no punch was thrown, as Miller avoided suspension, as the teams would find themselves in a Game 7. But the Bulls would outlast the Pacers to advance to a finals rematch with Utah. The Jazz would win Game 1 before the Bulls won 3 straight. Harper would have minimal offensive contributions, but would have a great all-around Game 4, as he finished with 8 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists. The Jazz would avoid elimination with a 2-point Game 5 win, but then in Game 6, the Bulls would bring an end to not only a great series, but an incredible dynasty, as Jordan's final shot completed a second three-peat and the end of an era in the NBA, which Harper had been a big part of, as he was now a 3-time champion, and for the regular season, he averaged about 9.5 points, 3 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. But as mentioned before, the Bulls were going to look much different in 1999. So Jordan would announce his second retirement in January, Pippen would be traded to Houston shortly before the beginning of the lockout-shortened 99 season, and Rodman would be released around the same time. As well, Phil Jackson's contract had expired, so the Bulls were now coached by Tim Floyd, and had Kukoc and Harper as their leaders. They had acquired Brent Barry, but the championship holdover duo would lead the team in scoring, as Harper would average double figures for the first time since '94. Yet it was more out of necessity, as he would shoot below 38% from the field. But even at 35 years old, he would tie for the team lead in steals and would average at least a steal and a block per game for the first time in a decade. Harper would appear in 35 games and hit double figures in 19 of them, including 3 games with at least 20 and 1 double-double. But the Bulls had lost so much firepower, as they were now the lowest scoring team in the league, with just an average defense, leading to a 13-37 record, as Harper's year saw him average about 11 points, 3.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. The Bulls released Harper after the season, and he would find his way to LA in a reunion with Phil Jackson, as he joined the Lakers on a 2-year deal. Harper joined their elite duo of Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant as a player who already knew the triangle offense and could form a similar defensive backcourt alongside Bryant. Harper was getting everything he could out of his knees, as he would appear in 80 games for the team, starting 76 of them and playing over 25 minutes per game. His numbers had dropped and he was shooting below 40%, but he still brought great value on defense, as he would finish with one of the 20 lowest defensive ratings in the league. And with the team LA possessed, Harper didn't have to worry about any of the scoring, as the Lakers would finish with a league-best 67-15 record and get a first-round matchup with Sacramento. Harper wouldn't score much, but he would average 5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and a steal in a 5-game series win. The second round would be easier, as the Lakers would defeat the Suns in 5 games. Harper had minimal contributions on both ends of the floor, but now the Lakers were gearing up for a conference finals matchup with Portland, and Harper would find his stride, as after the team split the first 2 games, with Harper putting up about 7.5 points per game, over the next 3, he would average nearly 15 points on over 51% shooting, as well as about 5 rebounds and 1.5 steals, including hitting the eventual game winner in Game 3, as the Lakers would go up 3-2. Portland would force a Game 7, but a legendary fourth-quarter comeback by LA would punch their ticket to an NBA Finals appearance versus Indiana. Harper had a great start, as he would hit double figures in each of the first 3 games, including 21 points on 8 of 12 shooting in a Game 2 win, after Kobe had left with a sprained ankle. He would cool off after this, averaging about 6 points, yet still dishing over 5 assists across the next 3 games, as LA would ultimately take the series in 6, giving Harper his 4th ring. But for the regular season, he would average about 7 points, 3.5 assists, and a steal per game. Harper was back in 01, but his knees were really failing him. He would only appear in 47 games this season, yet would still start all but one of them, as he put up similar averages on nearly 47% shooting. But in late March, he would undergo another knee surgery, which would shut him down for the remainder of the regular season. The Lakers would still finish at 56-26, but by the time Harper returned for the playoffs, Derek Fisher had taken over the starting point guard duties, as Harper wouldn't see any action in their first round sweep of Portland, then would appear briefly in 2 games of their second round defeat of Sacramento. He would get some garbage minutes in Game 4 of the Lakers' conference finals sweep of San Antonio, and would then appear in 3 games during their finals matchup versus Philly, scoring 5 points in a Game 2 win and 8 points in a Game 4 win, as the Lakers won their second straight title and Harper won his 5th. And his season ended with him averaging about 6.5 points, 2.5 assists, and a steal per game. And that was it for Harper. In the beginning, he looked like he was going to be one of the great swingmen of his era, and was in the best position to succeed in Cleveland. But unfair circumstances led to his trade to the Clippers, and even though he looked just as good once he got there, his ACL injury changed his whole career. He would be Jordan's replacement in Chicago, but once Jordan returned, Harper would have to accept a different role. And he could have been upset, but instead he embraced it, and became a key player during the Bulls' second three-peat. And he proved himself enough to get a couple more rings with the Lakers to end his career. A career that's another what-if story, as before the injury, he had a game quite similar to Michael Jordan, but instead ended up joining Jordan and recreating himself as a defensive specialist. And even though the numbers he put up in the first half of his career are more appealing, he was just as valuable during the second half, but instead for everything that the numbers don't show. And even though his bad knees affected his career, whether it was pre-injury or post-injury, Ron Harper could do everything on the court. But that's it for today's episode on Harp. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on the duo made up of his fellow draftees, or this one on his Clipper teammate. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.